Our guest today is Leslie Bernal, and our topic is how to filter out problem clients. So before we get into our main topic, I actually like to get a bit of backstory. So Leslie, can you tell us a bit about where you come from, what it is you did, or did leading up to working with WordPress? You can do education or any other kind of background information you want to give.
Yeah, I won't go back too far, but basically I was in the restaurant business service industry for about 12 plus years, everything from waitress to sandwich bitch to manager. And
is that an official title, sandwich bitch?
Yeah, pretty much. And that was mostly in Austin, Texas, which I love and I miss all my friends there. But I was there in Austin. I was very much I started college right out of high school, which was in like 94. But then, I took that break that, was supposed to be like a year-long break or whatever. Well, that turned into 12. Yeah, it turned into a real off and on, basically, community college here, a class here and there, whatever. Slowly racking up credits. And I just wasn't really serious about college or anything. And I was making good money and doing what I was doing. And then, finally I just kind of was like, okay, where am I going? There's only, I'm a manager at a restaurant, but there's only so much, I'm not seeking to own a restaurant. I'm not a cook or a chef. I'm not a restaurateur. So I was like, okay, I need to get back to what I love, which I knew I would wanted to do something creative in a creative industry. I actually had started out as a math major, and I would try to sneak in art classes because my parents were like, we're not paying tuition for an art major. So I was a math major, and I took every fine art class I could take, all the nude drawing, all the painting, even ceramics, anything art related I would do. Well, I finally had run out of classes in that area in like the studio art field. So I was like, okay, well, I'll try computers. And back when I started, it was Quark that we were working on.
Okay.
And then so fast forward a few years later, when I decided to go back to school, I moved to San Antonio to live with my family, to not have to pay rent, so I could just go to school full time and be serious.
The classic move.
Yes. And mind you, I'm in my 30s at that time. So yeah.
So I mean, that's actually not uncommon from guests on the show. Not necessarily that specific, like 30s going back to college, but just I'm in my 30s, I'm in my 40s. I think someone's even in their 50s, and they're like, I just decided I need to do a complete change of direction, and they got into WordPress, and a couple years later, all of a sudden they have this like successful business. So It's not unheard of. Might even become bragging rights. I don't know.
But yeah, so I'm still in San Antonio. I enrolled in a college here called University of the Incarnate Word. It's a private 4-year college. So of course they wouldn't take any of my credits. I had to start over. But
you had all those valuable art credits, though.
I know, but it was kind of a blessing in disguise because there was so much that I didn't know, at that point, having been gone, all those years.
Everything changes so fast because, I mean, like the software changes, the gear changes.
I had never touched Adobe. I had never touched another program. So, that was all there was now. There was no Quark. I was like, what happened to Quark? I started learning InDesign. Illustrator is my favorite. In fact, truth be told, if I can do a brochure or something that's supposed to be done in InDesign, I will do it in Illustrator. I know you're not supposed to, but I just love it.
I'm a big fan of Illustrator myself as well. I love just working with vector graphics. It's so nice.
So I did my 4 years, graduated. It was myself and another friend of mine who were the adult, they call you the adult students. And around graduation time, people were like, basically in the last year, people kind of look for the internships and see what are the plans after graduation. And I didn't apply to any. I was like, I don't want to work at a firm. I don't want a boss. It was basically my thing. I was like, I don't want to be, someone's employee anymore. I was like, I did not intend on doing web. In my major, we had to do web as part of the track, but my main thing was print. So I did learn some web. I knew, learned some coding and CSS and HTML, and we used Dreamweaver.
Okay,
But that wasn't my plan at all. So I was like, web, screw that. I'm not going to code all day. Like that's not fun. And so I was thinking, okay, well, I'll be a freelance print designer. Like that's a thing, right? But it's not a thing. I've really
not anymore anyway.
No. And, I did some brochures, some menu, to-go menus for friends of mine and things like that. But I could not find work. And more, when I would talk to people, they'd be like, well, do you do websites? And I was like, no, I don't. Like, stop asking me.
Look, I am a print designer. I am the cream of the crop. I only work on...
But yeah, and so that went on for a couple months, and it took a while to really hit me on the head and be like, you have clients. They're right here. Just not, you're not seeing it. So
nothing like bills to clear your site, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, okay, well, look, let me brush up on, I literally went to my college files, opened up my old sites that I did for college projects. The logo I have now, like, with me at the computer, I really have red glasses, and I really do always have my hair in a bun. Like, this is as girly as I get, really. But I was like, I hadn't done that in college, and I was like, well, look, I'm just gonna try this. I'm gonna, I'll build myself a website. I'll call myself a girl in her Mac. I can't think of anything else right now, so I'm gonna use this logo I did in college. And then I kind of just try to rehash my steps in what I learned in college as far as building websites. And then I don't really remember how I got to Elegant Themes. But Elegant Themes is where I learned about WordPress. I don't remember. I honestly just don't know how I got there. But I was like, WordPress? So I was like, I think I did have a blog at some point. Everybody starts a blog, and then you have that first, default post, and then sometimes you don't touch it again.
So the first iteration, just to be clear, the first iteration of your website, and I'm guessing your client websites, wasn't on WordPress. You were doing just straight HTML and CSS?
Was just regular HTML. Yeah, it was a restaurant website, and not great. I filled it.
Not great, just HTML.
I filled it with illustrations because that was still what I really.
Yeah.
And so I did all these food-related illustrations, and I was like, okay, it may not be a cool website, but I'll knock them out with my graphics.
Right.
And, so it kind of helped, but it's
actually kind of surprising how much difference. Just some nice illustrations or some nice images can make, even on a basic site. It's kind of mind blowing. But then you found WordPress because of what? Were just client demands, or your own desire to have more functionality or flexibility, or?
I just realized there were limits on what I could do as far as stability, really, in building websites. Okay. Since it wasn't really what I learned, I fixated on in college. I didn't learn a whole lot about setting things up right. I didn't know a lot about security, and I knew that there had to be, I couldn't offer a product that wasn't bare minimum, stable with the right type of code, current code, things like that. And so that's kind of what led me to WordPress. I was like, okay, well, this is a foundation that I can work on. I can at least build upon it. I think the first theme I used, I want to say, is Chameleon, and I did a skincare website, which is actually still up, and she's still my esthetician, and we're still talking. I still do updates for her. But yeah, Chameleon was the first theme I used, and she had a site that was done in HTML, so it was my first time moving something over to WordPress too. But yeah, and it kind of went from there. I stuck with Elegant Themes for a long time. I didn't even look at any other studio or anything like that, because y'all have so many anyway. So there was plenty to choose from. And yeah, it just kind of built from there. Through her, I got her son became a client, and then referrals, and it just kind of went from there. Yeah.
So before we jump into the main topic, I just wanted to revisit one thing, and because this was a topic that we brought up in our pre-interview, and it was something I noticed looking through your portfolio. As someone who, you saw the light, you figured out that print design wasn't really something that was going to pay the bills, and you transitioned to web design, but you do have that sort of print background and the design sensibilities that come with that, which is more of like a classical approach to design, more principle based than a lot of web design. Because I think a lot of web design today is based on like either features or trends or whatever. And so people are like, well, if I just have these elements in there somewhere, I'm doing the right thing.
Exactly.
But people who have more like actual design training, and particularly when they started around the time that maybe you or I did, they that meant like, design principles and starting from the very basic core foundation. So what, can you kind of speak to how those principles have carried over into the work that you do now from your early days?
Yeah. In fact, I mean, I can't imagine, I know not everybody is, whether it's about money for college or whatever the reason is. I know everybody doesn't get to have maybe a design background, but I can't imagine not having it and doing this. I could definitely see a struggle there, but I mean, basically things that you learn are like the grid, the visual grid that you have to have, hues in color. You don't want to put 3 colors on a site and they're all the same hue and there's no contrast. Things like cursive fonts in all caps, like, I mean, they're basic things that you learn, whether in like I guess they call it like the basics of graphic design. And, things like consistency. I don't ever like really plan like, okay, hey, I need to make sure I use this principle or this principle. It's just something that, it's in your mindset.
You've done it. You've drilled it so much that it just kind of comes out.
And I think the hardest part actually of all of it is when you need to pull back, because even I will find myself, okay, well, oh man, I found that cool feature. I know this, it's in line with what I'm doing. It's consistent with my layout, but I've already got all this going on. Like I need to save that for a site. And so I think editing is a big thing too.
Simplification and just making sure you stick to, I think we've talked about this in other episodes, is just, you want to make sure that you're designing to an objective and you're not designing for aesthetic whim, basically. Because there's always going to be something visually interesting that you could try, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the site's going to function better or achieve its goal any more efficiently or effectively. And so when you can find that balance between function and aesthetic appeal, then I think you're going to be on the right path.
Yeah, and there's 2 things that I always end up, not always, but I usually end up saying to my clients. One is, if everything stands out, then nothing stands out, because there are always going to be people who are like, okay, I want to make sure I have this here, and make sure in the sidebar has this, and this, bright here, bright there. And I was like, okay, well, now it's all coming at me, so nothing stand out. And the other thing I like to say is that, and sometimes they'll laugh about this, but I'll say, your website isn't for you. It's for your customer who you're trying to get. So because you like hot pink and, you really want to throw in some hearts, like has nothing to do with your business.
Yeah. This isn't your MySpace page. This is your business page.
Yeah. And
most likely.
The reality of it is, I think, is that most of the times when I'm done with the website, you really shouldn't, unless it's like a blog, you really shouldn't have to go back a lot. It should be there. It should stay the same. Don't want to change it every month,
I think somewhere I read, that just as a general guideline is like, maybe do a major overhaul every 2 to 3 years. Yeah. Otherwise, just minor changes and updates. Yeah, I think mine is coming up on that time.
But yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think trying to stick to the. Well, we started talking about design principles, and I think I veered a little bit.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, let's start to shift our conversation towards the main topic, which is how to filter out problem clients. Because right now, you've been through your journey. You started off turning clients away because you didn't know what you wanted to offer. Then you figured out what you wanted to offer, and now you've got plenty of clients. And I wanted to pick this topic because it's something that came up on the blog, actually, on the Elegant Themes blog. One of our writers, Joe Filan, wrote a post called 4 Essential Pages That You Forgot to Include on Your Website. And one of them was called Who You Don't Work With. And there seemed to be a lot of back and forth in the comments about whether or not that was actually necessary. But actually, most people were interested in just finding some examples because, actually, I think I might need to add something like that to my site. But I don't really know how to go about it tactfully, and I don't really know about how to present it. but when I was reviewing your site, I noticed you basically do this exact thing. You just use your FAQ section as like a sort of filtering process. Like,
Yeah.
read these 5 or 6 things and you'll know by the time you get to the end of it whether or not we should work together. So it seemed like it was a good fit to talk about this with you. Before we go into the exact filtering process, though, it kind of occurred to me that when you're trying to filter out problem clients, you almost need to figure out who your ideal client is first. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would definitely. And there's several, like, I don't want to say criteria. It's hard because everything's a case by case. But
yeah, well, I was going to ask, what is your ideal client, and how did you figure out what that looked like? Because we can't speak for everybody, but you could at least talk about what works for you and how you came to that conclusion.
Well, for me, the foremost is trust. You gotta trust my skills, and you have to let me do my job. And as far as the FAQ, I think when I first started my website, I always had an FAQ. There wasn't ever a bad experience that led me to be like, hey, I need to put this on here. It wasn't like that or anything. I just knew that I know me, and I know the type of people I'm probably not going to be well working with. And I kind of, when I first started writing it, I thought, okay, well, maybe this sounds too abrasive. My boyfriend was like, you kind of sound like a bitch. And like, and I was like, well, it's not that I'm not trying, of course not. I don't want to come off like that, but I do want to set the tone that, look, I know what I'm doing. If you trust me, we'll work out. But
no, I love it. I mean, I love how you lead in. Your first one is when you say it's just about me, and it says, let me be upfront here. I'm not a super guru developer, but I am a great designer, and this is what my background is. I went to school for this. Like I have, I've honed these skills over years with education and mentorship and all these things, and you're gonna have to be on board with the fact that I'm making some design decisions here, and you're going to need to trust me. Ironically, we just had an episode not too long ago with Nathan Duvall talking about customer care and how, his approach is to just listen to people and not insert, hey, I'm the expert here. But I would say there needs to be a balance. I mean, I agree with him that a lot of people want to be listened to, and they want to know that their input's being taken seriously. But at the same time, you can really weed out a lot of potential nightmare or just frustrating clients when you say, just so we're on the same page here, like, this isn't you constantly second guessing, my design choices, like we're going to go back and forth. We're going to figure out what's going on here, but we got to know that I need to know that you trust me to do my job, and we're not going to go through like 100 revisions before you're happy and I'm insane.
Yeah, no, and there's definitely the point, when it comes to the point of them telling me who their ideal, who's their customer, who's their client, who's their visitor. And when we get to that, I certainly open up my ears. I don't know their business any better than they do. So certainly for that, I have to shut up and listen and, give them the floor. But yeah, and I think even not just about design, find out if we are compatible, just like on a human level. Like, how do they talk to me? Are they talking down to me? Am I their slave? Are they, how is the tone in email? Is it like, okay, I need this now, and they just hired, there's a lot of just kind of trial, kind of playing by ear, I guess, when you first get a potential client and see
what are
how
some red flags? I mean, you just named a few, but like, if you had a list of red flags that you keep an eye out for, what would some of those be?
Certainly if in our first chat, like if I don't get a word in edgewise, or if they don't even ask me what my skills are, or if they don't ask me what are my ideas about what, or is there anything I can bring to the table to help them kind of see where their site should be going. If they tell me they're somewhat of a designer, or they have a good eye for design, or, they've kind of, I think I put on my FAQ, like if they've dabbled in web design, it's not going to work. I'm not going to co-design.
Right.
If by all means, if you want to build your own site with Wix and then come back to me after it sucks, then fine. But it's just, I really am here to help, but you have to let me help you,
Yeah. No, I totally can relate to that. So what happens when you get that ideal client? Because I'd like to contrast maybe a bad experience with a good experience. So like when you line up with somebody who's hitting all the right notes and you guys decide to work together, what does that working relationship look like from the time that they contact you to like the time that you hand off the website?
I actually have a client right now who, in fact, the other day she told me she hired me because of my FAQ, because she wanted the guidance and she didn't want to make the wrong decisions. She had told me when she first emailed me, she said that she was going to try to do it herself and realized it was just beyond her skills and beyond really, she didn't have she wasn't able to put her vision, on a website.
I mean, confidence is appealing, right? I mean, people want to know that if they're hiring you to be a designer, you're confident in your ability to design, because I think maybe some people don't want to be, that kind of annoying nightmare client, but they're not confident that you know what you're doing, but you're just in their price range or something along those lines.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, she's pretty ideal. I mean, she gives me her thoughts and tells me, okay, this is what I really need. I've seen this elsewhere, and is there any way we can incorporate it? What do you think? That's kind of more of what it is what do you, kind of an exchange of what do you think? And I'll ask her, I was like, okay, well, I did this, so go ahead and take a look. Tell me your thoughts. And it's more of like an exchange of ideas instead of like a boss and an employee and a client, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think a lot of the other guests on the show, we've talked about how, they've found success when the balance they strike with their clients is a partnership and not a employer-employee type relationship. It's more of a, they're not taking marching orders, they're collaborating, and I think exactly. that's a really good balance to strike.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about, okay, so you've given a few general anecdotes, but nothing specific. What is that ideal experience of collaboration? What does that contrast with, a negative experience or a nightmare experience with a client? Do you have a story? I feel like we all got a story. You got to have one, right?
Yeah, I have one that sticks out.
You don't have to share any names, obviously.
No, I won't. I have one, and it was the only, I guess, bad experience I could say. We ended up parting ways. I even gave back some of the deposit, which I don't normally do. It was one of those, look, just here, like, I can't deal with this. And it was the first and last time that's ever happened. But she, it was funnily enough, the basic design stuff, like logo at the top, not contrasting fonts, like don't put cursive in all caps. Those little things that those are no-nos, she wanted. And I was like, I can't put my name on that. Like, I can't, like, your logo has to be up there. And she was like, no, just stick it at the bottom. I don't really like it. But she didn't want to pay for a new one. And I was like, okay, well, can we put your name, the name of your business? Like, something has to tell me where I'm at. And she was like, no, just make it like this site. And she showed me a site. It was bad. I don't ever say that. A lot of clients tell me, like, I really love this and it's not that great. And I don't ever say it's not. I'll just say, like, my line is, I can do much better than that. So, but it was more of like, make my site look like this. And it wasn't good. It was almost felt like a bit of just taking somebody else's work and calling it mine. And I was like, I don't, it's not going to work for us. We're not on the same page here.
So how do you extricate yourself from that situation? You said you ended up having to part ways. What did that look like?
Well, I mean, we got on the phone and I was like, this is not how I work. You're asking me to do things that just on a basic design level, I cannot do in good faith as a designer. I can't put my name on this site. I wouldn't want to promote it. I was like, if you can trust me, and there was a step kind of going through this. It wasn't just immediate.
Yeah, you didn't call her up and say, this strike one, you're out.
No, I asked a few times, like, look, if you could just let me come up with something and let me tell you why this can't happen here and why this can't go there. But I felt like I was just talking to a wall.
Yeah. So did you have a bit I mean, it probably wasn't formalized, but did you have like an escalation process where you're like, okay, we're getting to a point where this is becoming unfeasible?
Yeah, I was just like, we're just not on the same page with the design and I can't continue with it. And I was like, I said, look, I don't normally do the full refund back. And I was like, I wasn't sure if the money was a big concern for her. Honestly, I don't think it was. But I felt better giving her some of her money back because at that point, I didn't feel like I'd done a lot.
So it seems like there's, I mean, obviously your concerns so far and on your FAQ are mostly about design and the process of design and making sure that you can just get on the same page with people in that sense. There are other types of problem clients though. Like for instance, you could have someone who lines up with you across the board on ideology or, whatever you want to call it. And yet, they're impossible to deal with on the financial side, or you can just never get a hold of them. Have you run into those problems as well?
Definitely getting content can be an issue. A lot of times in the beginning, clients are very gung ho of like, yes, I'll get you the text, the photos, all this. And then weeks go by and I don't, hear from them. And in that time, I may have picked up some work. So now they're kind of on the back burner. But then when they get it to me, they're kind of expected, okay, well, now I have it. How many, 24 hours, 48 hours, what are we talking here? And I'm like, wait a second, now I need to, reconfigure my whole plate here. But I think a lot of people go in with good intentions, of course. I'm sure, they need to get me all this stuff, but they don't realize if they have to grab from here and they need this person to get them this, there's time is definitely an issue in getting everything together. As far as like things like payment, I've never not been paid. I've had to chase a few people down and send the reminders through PayPal a couple times, but nothing major, nothing big.
Okay, great. Well, I mean, it looks like we're getting to the end of our time limit for the interview, which means it's time for us to do a parting thought. I like to end each interview by asking our guests to kind of sum up their thoughts or to make a closing point on the main topic. And today we've been talking about how to filter out problem clients. And I think you've given some good advice on how you deal with problem clients, how you spot problem clients. And we were sort of just talking about how to extricate, yourself from those problem situations to move forward. Is there anything that you would want to close off as far as, what people can do that want to start down this path, what they can do today to maybe begin the process of filtering out some of these problems that they might be having, whether it's clients who aren't going to listen or collaborate well, clients who may or may not be responsive for content, clients who may not be, responsive or timely with payment. Anything along those lines. Is there anything that you would recommend people do to start getting, I guess, just a higher caliber or a more cooperative class of client?
I guess I would just suggest, maybe not, I don't want to say like hound clients or anything for like that, but I definitely think I don't contact them enough as I probably should.
So frequent touch, just talk, more communication.
Stay in communication, know what's going on. Sometimes it could be something personal in their life. That happens a lot. Life happens. And so a lot of times it's got nothing to do with the website, just something is going on in their life. I think just frequent communication. I kind of, with the whole not knowing about security, not knowing about all that, I also didn't know a lot about contracts, learn in the beginning about contracts, as well as all the security plugins, all the backup stuff you're supposed to do.
Set expectations up front.
Yeah. And I think a big thing also is price. I am I've just now after 3 years in, raising my prices. I never have. I started out very low because I knew I was new to the game. I knew there was a lot I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel right charging, probably what a lot of designers do. So I know I was on the lower end. So I'm just now kind of getting more to the median range, because I'm more confident in my skills and I've learned a lot. But I think a lot of people, when they go in, and I get a lot of emails actually from that customer spotlight on ET.
Oh, yeah, great.
I get a lot of emails from people asking, like, how did you start? And, how did you get clients? And what about your pricing and things like that? And they're all just like I was. Like, I can't charge that much. But I think you can charge that much. You just need to be confident about it and make sure you're doing everything right as far as just the basic, setup and things like that. yeah, I mean, there's a lot, to learn in the beginning, but I think if there's plenty of resources. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you mind if I summarize just to wrap up?
Yeah.
All right. So, and correct me if I'm wrong. So in summary, for everybody looking to start to narrow down and add some filters to their client process, you're going to want to be clear about who you are and how you work up front, and set your prices so that you're actually getting people who are serious about design and serious about hiring you for your skills and not just for something they can get out of you for cheap. And make sure that you're communicating often and getting a feel for your client all the way through the process. And I guess at the very beginning, in addition to being clear about who you are and what you are, also be clear about the terms, whether that's a formal contract, which we would recommend, or or just stating in clear detail in all of your emails and communications and on your website what exactly a project does and does not include. And finally, just not being afraid to, while still being polite, stand up for yourself and when necessary, extricate yourself from relationships that have gone toxic. Mm-hmm. Fair enough?
Yeah.
All right, great. I think you gave us a lot to think about, a lot to apply. Leslie, thank you so much for being on Divi Nation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Don't forget, if you're watching this video on YouTube or Facebook, take a moment to subscribe, follow, like, and/or share. It really helps. Thanks.